Penguin Random House Audio presents The Passion Economy, the new rules for thriving in the 21st century. This is the author, Adam Davidson. For Jen, without whom there would be nothing. Always remember that you are absolutely unique, just like everyone else, often attributed to Margaret Mead. You must learn from the mistakes of others. You will never live long enough to make them all yourself. Human Engineering by Harry Myers and Mason M. Roberts, 1932. Preface. When I think about the change in the economy, the change that has shifted the United States and most of the rest of the world from one sort of economic system to an entirely different one, I think about my dad and my grandfather, and how hard it was for them to understand each other. My father's father, Stanley, was born in 1917 and died a century later, still a tall, proud man with a thick head of hair that was naturally black until his last decade. Stanley looked to me like Superman, strong chin, chest pushed forward, posture erect. He didn't have time for frivolity. He was a serious man who did serious work. With his young grandchildren, he had a routine, a firm handshake followed by a gift of a $20 bill and some vague homily about doing good work, after which we were dismissed. I cannot remember ever speaking to him when I was young. I only recall smiling, shaking hands, and rushing off. When I became an adult and, to his surprise and mine, a reporter covering economics, I was able to talk with him about the one topic he truly loved, business. My dad, also named Stanley, though he has always gone by his middle name, Jack, could not be more different. He is an actor who, for as long as I can remember, has told me that the most wonderful part of his profession is that you remain childlike your entire life. As I write this, my dad is 83 and has maintained an imaginative, exuberant view of the world. He is riveted by children and loves to hear every word my young son says, after which he calls out, "Did you hear that? He made up an amazing story." My dad has always been fascinated by pretty much everything. Science, the news, art, history, sports. There is only one subject he has always found unbearably boring, perhaps a bit evil, and entirely unworthy of discussion: business. In a sense, this book is a reconciliation of the conflict between these two Stanleys, these two men who lived in the same country at the same time, but might as well have been on entirely different planets. For most of the 20th century, the overwhelming majority of men and women were forced to make a choice when it came to work. Follow the money or follow their passion. Become like my grandfather or become like my dad. But now, more than ever before, business and art, profit and passion are linked. They have come together in a way that would have made no sense to either of the Stanleys in the past. To illuminate the transition I describe and celebrate in this book, let me tell you more about my grandfather, since he is a pretty representative stand-in for the entire 20th century economy. Stanley Jacob Davidson Sr. was born in New England to young parents who were cut off from their own families. His father was a Jewish immigrant whose parents had disowned him, even practiced mourning rituals as if he had died, when he impregnated and then married a Christian dance hall girl. The dance hall girl was herself alienated from her family, a rough clan barely eking out a living in a remote corner of Maine. The new broke and broken family in Worcester, Massachusetts, faced unending crises, culminating in Stanley's father's death of tuberculosis when my grandfather was only 5. His mother, overwhelmed, put Stanley and his brother in an orphanage for much of a year before taking them out again, with the provision that, even as grade schoolers, they would need to work and bring money to the family. Decades later, Stanley was still prouder of his childhood business. He bought hens, built an incubator, and sold eggs to neighbors than of anything else he would go on to accomplish in his life. Before he was 20, while the Great Depression was ravaging the country's economy, Stanley was married with a young son, my dad, soon to be followed by 3 more children. He was lucky to get a factory job that paid $16 a week. The factory made external grinders, large machines that spin two parallel cylinders of metal, coated with an abrasive sandpaper-like surface. The cylinders could grind a metal cube into a perfectly smooth sphere in seconds. This is how ball bearings are made. It was brutal, dangerous work. This was the era of big men in blue overalls, working in hot factories, dodging sparks, their bodies covered in a mix of sweat and grease. For those who worked alongside Stanley, the tiny particles of metal dust made coughing and sneezing a sharp, painful, often bloody agony. But overall, the ball bearing business was good for Stanley, especially with the start of World War II. You can't fight a war without ball bearings, Stanley used to say. And it's true. Every moving piece on every war machine, the tires, the guns, the gun turrets, the tank treads, the tank rifles, moves because it has ball bearings at its joints. Stanley worked 2 shifts a day, often 6 days a week. The post-war economic boom was even better for the ball-bearing business and for Stanley. America had a lot of building to do. The interstate highway system, suburbs filled with houses, roads and sewers, cities that grew much bigger, factories getting larger and more efficient, and every bit of building required ball bearings. They were in the wheels and gears of tractors and cranes, and the machinery inside the factories, and in the elevators and escalators in those tall buildings. Stanley worked hard and was promoted again and again, and eventually ran the factory. He was smart and good at strategic thinking, but his core management ability was that he was tough. He saw a factory floor as a machine, and each man, it was almost entirely men, as a cog in that machinery. They could be annoying cogs, always complaining about this or that, but a strong manager knew how to shut their complaining down and get them back to work. Did Stanley love ball bearings? Did he have a particular passion about them? No, he most certainly did not. He got the job because his father-in-law knew a guy. And he stayed in the job because that's what you did when you had a job. You stayed and tried to get promoted. He retired after 54 years, having worked at the same company his entire adult life. Every moment of his life reinforced the same lesson. Hard work is how people take care of their loved ones, how countries stay free, how life improves for everybody. Stop working, even for a moment, and everything will fall apart. He worked. His wife took care of the kids, and those kids barely knew the man who was rarely at home and, when there, was often angry and impatient. My dad says he had no idea what Stanley did for a living, only that whatever it was seemed awful. From an early age, my dad had passions. He loved telling stories. He loved making people laugh. He loved daydreaming about a life much more fun and expansive than the grim, plodding one of his father. In the Worcester of the 1940s, a boy like Jack, a bright but indifferent student who cracked jokes and hung out with friends instead of working, could be assessed only one way. He was trouble. He would either be tamed or become a lifelong loser, broke, drunk, maybe in prison. My father internalized this view. He drank and smoked and got into fights and was suspended a dozen times before the principal expelled him. When Stanley learned of the expulsion, he told my dad that he could no longer live at home. He washed his hands of him. My dad was on his own, working at a shoe factory at 16. It was miserably boring work, nailing heels onto shoes, one after the other, all day long. He can remember saying to himself, "My life is over already." His father, it seemed, had been right. Men who follow their passions go nowhere. My dad certainly couldn't think of any grown man he had met who had successfully built a life of fun and personal expression. That was for wealthy people and drunks. Over the next several years, my dad had a series of unlikely experiences that led to precisely the life he wanted. He joined the Marines, thinking it would transform him into the man his father wanted him to be. After his discharge, he managed to get into the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. He didn't do well and was about to flunk out when a friend asked for a favor. The friend was putting on a play in the school's theater department, and one of the actors had pulled out at the last minute. "Could Jack please
Sample complete. Ready to continue?